In the winter of 1232, on the frozen steppe of Central Asia, a scene unfolded that would haunt chroniclers for centuries. A noblewoman, her robes torn, her face streaked with frost and blood, is dragged across the hard, wind-swept grass. 4 Mongol warriors pin her to the ground, while a 5th stands over them, with a horse still gasping its last breaths. There is no haste, no simple executioner's swing. Instead, they open the animal's belly while it is alive. The wound yawns like a grotesque mouth. Then, with a calm that chills the observer, they do the unthinkable. They force the woman into the raw cavity of the horse, arranging her in a fetal curl so that only her head and limbs protrude from the torn flesh. The horse shudders. The woman screams, a sound that is swallowed by the wind. The Mongols leave her there. To many European witnesses who later wrote this down, the punishment appeared almost clinical, bloodless, in the sense that it was not a battlefield, but a ritualized spectacle. Yet beneath that detached terminology lay a calculated surgical cruelty. This was not random savagery. It was a punishment built with an understanding of anatomy, religion, and political theater. It was engineered to kill in 3 precise ways, to hit a cultural nerve about purity and taboo, and to send a message so loud it rolled from Korea to Hungary. There is also one recorded exception. A woman who survived and forced a change in Mongol law. At the 8-minute mark, we'll examine her method of escape. For now, we must ask why an empire that prided itself on efficiency would choose such a method over a clean beheading. First, context. The Mongol legal code, the yasa, was ruthless but procedural. Punishment matched the offense and the social status of the offender. Crimes and penalties were not applied equally. The distinction between commoner and noble decided life or death. This particular execution, being sewn into a living horse, was exceptionally rare and reserved for 3 categories of offense: adultery by noblewomen, treason among aristocrats, and espionage by captured elites. Note the pattern. This punishment targeted nobility, people whose blood, in the Mongol worldview, carried political consequence. Understand who the Mongols were in the early 13th century. In 25 years, they conquered more territory than Rome managed in 4 centuries. They engineered siegecraft, ran a postal network that outpaced anything Europe would develop for generations, and promoted talent across class lines in a meritocratic military machine. Call them barbarians if you like, but they were strategic, not merely bloodthirsty. They knew the value of theater, how a punishment performed in public could become a diplomatic instrument as powerful as any envoy. So why compose such a grotesque tableau? Why splice human flesh into animal flesh rather than choose the swift economy of the sword? The answer lies in taboo, an obsession with ritual purity and the symbolic contamination of blood. To the Mongols, and in many steppe cosmologies, blood was social currency. Defilement had political meaning. To force a noble body into a living animal's belly was to erase and then display that person's social status in the most irreversible way possible. It was meant to degrade lineage, to make the body of the punished into an object lesson that could be read by men on distant frontiers. But cruelty alone does not explain the precision of the act. Contemporary accounts, most notably by Persian observers, record the ritual with anatomical exactness. Watch closely because the sequence matters. The condemned is stripped, bound at wrists and ankles, intentionally not too tight. The bindings allow blood to circulate. That detail is not mercy, it is calculation. A live, healthy horse is selected, typically a prime mare, weighing 8 to 1,000 pounds. The beast is forced onto its side, legs restrained. A skilled executioner makes a lateral incision about 2 feet long, through hide, muscle, and the peritoneum. The animal bellows as intestines spill like pale ropes. The executioner reaches in, shifting organs aside to carve a pocket within the still-living cavity. Then the victim is folded into that pocket in a fetal position, head protruding from one end, feet from the other, arms pulled through additional cuts so they too jut from the ruptured hide. The assembled image is a hideous parody of birth. The horse, still living, convulses. The human body, trapped within, is subject to a trio of death mechanisms that forensic experts from much later centuries would recognize. Hemorrhagic shock from internal crushing and ongoing blood loss. Asphyxiation due to diaphragmatic compression and compromised respiration. And systemic infection or septic shock as gut contents contaminate both animal and human tissues. The bindings that allow circulation increase the time window for each of these mechanisms to act. Pain prolonged into terror. For a Persian diplomat forced to record the spectacle, words stumble. Malik Juveni, one eyewitness, wrote every detail down with a mixture of disgust and clinical interest. He noted the precision, the selection of the animal, the incision, the careful manipulation of organs. He described the execution not as an act of frenzied violence, but as a ritualized discipline. That discipline was the point. Mongol justice did not seek only to kill. It sought to communicate. This is what happens to those who transgress the social order. Later, modern forensic pathologists would study such descriptions and remark on their macabre sophistication. The sequence exploits physiology in predictable ways. But there is another layer we cannot ignore: religion and taboo. The mingling of human and animal in this way violated sacred boundaries. It was an attack on the soul of lineage and on the ability of the punished to be claimed by any proper burial rites. That final indignity, denial of ritual closure, was as powerful as the pain itself. And yet, amid this calculated horror, history preserves the story of one woman who crawled out alive. Her survival would not only become legend in the chronicles, but would force legal scrutiny and eventually change. We'll examine her escape in detail shortly, how she exploited a single physiological fact that the executioners had not accounted for. But first, keep this image in your mind: a living horse, its belly slit open, a noblewoman folded within like carrion, a ritual performed with the cold precision of statecraft. That image tells you something crucial about Mongol power, about a people who measured violence as carefully as they measured victory. Step 6. The executioner reaches for thick sinew thread, the same unbreakable cord used for Mongol bows. With the precision of a surgeon, he begins to sew the incision shut around the woman's body. The stitches are deliberate, tight enough that she can't escape, yet loose enough for her to keep breathing. Her chest rises in short, panicked bursts. The horse's flesh quivers around her as the needle slides through skin and muscle. Step 7. The horse is released. It lurches, tries to stand. Sometimes it staggers a few feet before collapsing again. Sometimes it only thrashes helplessly in the dust. Either way, the woman is now sealed inside a dying creature, the sounds of its labored breathing mingling with her muffled screams. Then the crowd disperses. No one looks back, not out of mercy, but ritual. The chronicler Ata Malik Juveni recorded that witnesses were forbidden to turn around. To observe what came next would make them impure. The victim's suffering was meant to unfold unseen, her death left to nature, the gods, and time. But here's what almost no one tells you: the horse was kept alive on purpose, and not for mercy. Its final moments served a biological purpose so grim that modern forensic scientists still find it difficult to believe. Because the Mongols weren't simply executing their victims. They were engineering death. They created a system of 3 simultaneous races against time, each one fatal, each one competing to finish the job first. Death Race 1, heat stroke and hypothermia. Once the stitches close, the victim is trapped inside an organic oven. A living horse's internal temperature hovers near 99 degrees, but stress pushes that number higher. As the animal's body begins shutting down, the temperature climbs to between 105 and 118 degrees. Inside that fleshy chamber, the woman's body is pressed against organs that are literally cooking her alive. Sweat drenches her, but there's nowhere for it to evaporate. Her body's only cooling system has failed. Within 90 minutes, confusion sets in. Her pulse spikes, muscles tremble. Medieval witnesses described victims mad with fire. That's not poetic metaphor. It's the moment when brain temperature crosses 104 degrees, triggering delirium and convulsions. Death race 2, suffocation and positional asphyxiation. Trapped in a fetal position, her diaphragm can't expand. Each breath becomes shallower than the last, barely half her normal oxygen intake. At first, she can gasp enough to survive, but as the horse dies, rigor mortis sets in. Its abdominal muscles stiffen, compressing her chest like a tightening vice. Her blood oxygen levels plummet 90%, 85%, 80%. Her mind fogs. She's drowning in air. Marco Polo once wrote of punishments without weapons, executions that killed through the environment itself. Scholars now believe this is exactly what he was describing. In these conditions, death by asphyxiation typically took 7 hours. 7 hours of fading breath, the brain slowly starved of oxygen, hallucinations setting in as the world narrows to a tunnel of fire and dark. Death race 3, septic shock. And here's where it becomes truly diabolical. The inside of a horse's abdomen is a swamp of bacteria, E. coli, Clostridium, bile acids, stomach fluid. The condemned woman's skin, torn and scraped from her capture, is pressed against all of it. Within 6 to 8 hours, her body begins to swell from infection. Sepsis sets in, blood poisoning so violent that it sends her immune system into a fatal overdrive. Her fever spikes even higher, but now it's not from the horse's warmth. It's her own body attacking itself. Organs shut down one by one. The skin flushes red, then pale. Within 24 to 48 hours, even if the heat and suffocation hadn't killed her, infection would. And then there's a fourth killer the Mongols didn't have to lift a finger for. Predators. The stench of open entrails and sweat could carry for miles. Wolves, vultures, and wild dogs picked up the scent within hours. Historical records describe scavengers circling by nightfall, drawn to the sound, the smell, the motion. They tore at exposed limbs while the victim was still conscious, her screams blending with the cries of the dying horse. So which death came first? The heat, the suffocation, the infection, or the predators? The Mongols designed it so that no one would ever know. And here's the most haunting part. The Mongols considered this humane. It sounds impossible, but to understand why, you have to understand their deepest fear. The fear that defined their justice system, their wars, even their diplomacy. Because to a Mongol noble, death itself wasn't the ultimate horror. It was something far worse, the spilling of noble blood, which raises one question: why go through all this? Why build an elaborate nightmare when a clean sword stroke could end it in seconds? The answer lies in the heart of Mongol spirituality, the belief that blood carried not just life, but divine identity. To spill it was to corrupt the soul forever. And that journey is where the story turns from horror to theology. The answer lies buried deep in the spiritual foundation of Mongol culture. A belief so fundamental it shaped not only warfare but the entire system of justice. To the Mongols, blood contained the soul, not metaphorically, literally. To spill someone's blood was to release their soul into the world, uncontrolled where it could wreak havoc, curse the living or contaminate sacred spaces. For commoners, this was problematic but manageable. For the nobility, the golden lineage, the warrior spirits, royal bloodlines, it was catastrophic. The secret history of the Mongols commands, "Let not the blood of the golden lineage touch the earth." This wasn't about mercy. It was cosmic risk management. Juveni, a papal envoy who visited the Mongol Empire in 1246, wrote about this taboo with visible confusion. He watched nobles executed and recorded, "They kill princes without drawing a single drop of blood," as if blood itself were the crime. He could not understand that he was witnessing a culture that had perfected multiple, bloodless execution methods, all designed to kill nobility without violating the sacred contamination of spilled blood. Let's count them. Method 1, rolling the condemned in a thick carpet or felt rug, then trampling them with horses. Bones crushed, organs ruptured, but skin intact. No blood spilled. This was how Kaif al-Mustasim was executed in 1258 after the fall of Baghdad. Method 2. Drowning. Water death was considered purifying. The soul passed to the river spirits rather than escaping into the world. Used primarily for shamans or spiritual leaders. Method 3. Horse punishment. Death from internal causes, heat, suffocation, infection. Technically bloodless, spiritually clean. Method 4. Spine breaking. The victim is bent backward over a knee until vertebrae snap. Paralysis is instant. Death follows slowly from internal bleeding. Blood never leaves the body, invisible, clean. This same obsession extended to daily life. Mongols drank mare's milk instead of slaughtering animals unnecessarily. Their greatest insult was to spill a drink, symbolically wasting life essence. Warriors who died with unspilled blood were believed to join Tengri, the sky god, in eternal paradise. Their entire worldview revolved around one obsession: containment. But here's the detail to remember. If spilling noble blood was forbidden, what happened when a member of the golden lineage survived one of these punishments? Around 1284, during the reign of Kublai Khan, history, or legend, records exactly that. A noble woman, her name lost to time, though some sources call her Narin, meaning son, was accused of adultery with a Chinese official. The sentence, the horse ritual. She was sewn into a living mare on the steps outside Karakoram. Standard procedure until it went wrong. The horse died first. Not from blood loss, but from stress. Modern veterinarians confirm that a horse's heart rate can exceed 200 BPM under extreme trauma, triggering cardiac arrest. That is what happened here. As the horse's body cooled rapidly in the frigid Central Asian night, the woman, delirious from heat and oxygen deprivation, began to revive slightly, and here is the survival method promised at the start. She used her teeth. The sinew stitches were strong but organic. For hours, probably 8 to 10, she frayed and snapped each thread. Her lips shredded, teeth broke. Still, she created an opening wide enough to force her shoulders through. By the time nomadic herders discovered her 2 days later, she had crawled nearly 200 yards from the horse carcass. She suffered severe dehydration, exposure, and septic wounds. By all medical logic, she should have been dead. She wasn't. Her survival was more than a miracle. It was a seismic shift. The Mongols could no longer claim the horse punishment as infallible. Noble blood had survived its containment. The legal code, the yasa, was reconsidered. And a legend was born, a story of endurance, ingenuity, and defiance that echoes across centuries. The herders brought her back to their camp, tending to her with traditional Mongol medicine. Fermented mare's milk for rehydration, animal fat poultices to seal her wounds, and shamanic rituals to combat the fever. Against impossible odds, she survived, and here's where it gets politically and theologically fascinating. When word reached Kublai Khan, he faced a crisis of belief. If a noble woman survived a punishment ordained by the yasa, the legal code said to be divinely inspired by Tengri, what did it mean? Was she innocent? Had the gods intervened? Or had the punishment itself failed? Kublai, already incorporating Chinese and Buddhist philosophy into Mongol governance, saw an opportunity for reform. He didn't abolish the horse punishment outright, that would have been too radical, but he modified it. New protocol required checking the victim after 6 hours. If still alive, death was ensured through manual suffocation, pressing on the throat until the end. Faster, more certain, still technically bloodless. By the early 1300s, as Mongols converted to Islam and Buddhism, religions with different blood taboos, the horse punishment was gradually replaced. Strangulation by silk cord became the new method, bloodless, spiritually clean, and completed in minutes instead of days. The last documented case of the horse punishment appears in Persia in 1304. After that, it vanishes from records, but its legacy endured. What does this reveal about the Mongols? A paradox emerges. They were sophisticated enough to create the first international postal system, implement religious tolerance across dozens of cultures, and engineer siege weapons capable of reducing stone fortresses to rubble. Their legal code surpassed anything in medieval Europe. Yet they applied that same systematic thinking to engineer suffering. This wasn't cruelty for cruelty's sake, it was psychological warfare perfected. Every execution sent a message, to subjects, to enemies, to neighboring empires. The horse punishment specifically whispered to the nobility, "Your blood means nothing. Your status means nothing. We can kill you slowly, invisibly, and even the gods won't intervene." Today, we call similar methods white torture, stress positions, sensory deprivation, techniques leaving no visible marks. Modern 20th century innovations. The Mongols had perfected them over 800 years ago. So here's a question for you, and I genuinely want your answer in the comments. Could you survive 24 hours sewn inside a horse carcass at 118 degrees? Not just brave enough to endure, but physically survive the heat, the suffocation, the septic conditions. Would you stay calm to conserve oxygen or panic and die faster? Think carefully, then leave your honest answer. And if you've made it this far, you're clearly drawn to history's darkest truths. Next week, we're investigating the Viking blood eagle, the ritual execution where lungs were carved from the rib cage. Did it really happen, or is it a myth born from medieval propaganda? The evidence may shock you. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and I'll see you in the next one.